So I guess my story starts back in a little country town where I was looking for opportunities, really, basically opportunities to have a career, get something outside of a small country town.
And in 1988, a van rolled into town.
Yep, and it was just, to me, it was a vision of escape, to be honest, of a little country town. But it was also a vision of a career, where options of having a career were very limited in the town. But the defence, to me, was a genuine career option that I wanted to take up, and I signed up on the spot. It didn't take much convincing. I signed up to be a radio technician in the Air Force, which was a 6-year commitment. That was backed with, I think, around 2 years of training. So I saw it as a way of gaining technical skills and being able to learn something as well. It was a bit like an apprenticeship, not quite an apprenticeship, but a bit like an apprenticeship. I'd been working for about probably over a year, would have been over a year, 18 months in transport, and everything had been going really well. I had gained a nickname by that stage as the 20-year man because everyone could see that I was committed to my job.
What does it really mean, 20-year man? What's that about?
Well, 20 back then, you only had to do 20 years and you could then retire on your pension. You were then eligible for a military pension. So it would have meant that at the age of 42, I could have retired on a pension. So my goal and career aspirations was to be the 20-year man who'd done his 20 years and got his pension. My flight lieutenant of the transport section came to me and he said, "Danny, I've been asked to present you for a military interview." And he said, "I've never been asked to do that." And he said, "What's going on?" And he asked me what was going on. He himself had not been told the purpose of this interview. So we arrived at this interview room, and I was entered into the room, and there was 2 military police personnel sitting at a desk. The base commander was in attendance, and obviously my flight lieutenant was behind me. And as I walked in, obviously, you are required to salute to superior officers, which I did. So I undertook the formal requirements of meeting that person. And then I was told to sit down at the desk on the other side of the 2 military police officers.
What next occurred?
The next was quite the shock because suddenly I knew what it was about. A photograph was placed in front of me of an LGBTI bar in Paran, and I was asked what type of people frequent this bar. And that was like the old shit moment. Oh, sorry.
That's fine. You felt like that.
That was the oh shit moment. It was like, this is about my sexuality. And I was in shock. I was in shock from that first photo. That first photograph had me absolutely reeling in my head as to, my God, this is about me going to gay bars. And I was shocked. I was shocked that that's what it was about. And they then had a series of dates and times that they had known that I'd gone to those gay bars. I was basically what I would consider, I know Yvonne, who's my support person today, presented yesterday, described as an interrogation, and that's what I classify as begun the interrogation, was that opening line of questioning. They asked over 100 questions over that period of time. I think it was about 2 hours that I was in this meeting. This was humiliating and shaming. It was shaming and humiliating questioning they were asking about deeply personal things that, things that I was still working out for myself. I wasn't ready for this label of homosexual. Eventually their questioning got down to, LAC Liversidge, are you a homosexual? And I was forced to answer for the very first time. I don't think I'd even call myself a homosexual at that stage. It wasn't a tag I was using on myself. But they had forced me now to, for the very first time, say, and it was the very first time I ever said it out loud, yes, I believe I'm a homosexual. And that was just, as a young person still trying to work out where you fit in the world and where your sexuality on the spectrum sits. You know, my sexuality wasn't as black and white as it is today. It was very grey in those days, and they forced me to put a tag on myself, which I wasn't prepared at that stage to put that tag on myself. But they made me put that tag on myself because they had the evidence of me going to gay bars. Yeah, and eventually it got down to the, they wrapped up the interview with the term, AC Liversidge, are you aware that homosexuality is incompatible with military service? And I thought to myself, incompatible? In what way? Incompatibility was never explained to me what they meant by that term. They just said I was incompatible. And that was funny because my flight lieutenant thought I was his best troop, so he didn't think I was incompatible. But here were these strangers sitting across the table telling me that I was now incompatible with military service.
Now, it then turned to you being put various options.
Yes.
3 options. What were they?
They were blackmail. That's what they were, blackmail. So they presented 3 exit strategies for me. All of them were traumatic, but there was one that was least traumatic, and that was the one they continually pushed me to take. So they said that if I didn't accept to leave of my own accord, then I will be dishonourably discharged. My records will be marked that I was discharged for being a homosexual, and my training records would be withheld from my final exit papers. So they were suggesting that they would out me and ruin any other chances of re-employment if I didn't agree to leave on my own accord.
What did that mean for you?
It meant the end of my career. Everything I had been working for, it meant to me that no matter how much I went in every day to do the job to the best of my ability, it was worthless because my job performance wasn't the first criteria of the Air Force. Heterosexuality was the first criteria, and I didn't make the first criteria. So therefore, I was already incompatible from that point of view. It just meant that, despite the fact that I was a loyal, committed, enthusiastic airman going in every day to do the job to the best of his ability, was worth nothing at that point in time. So the day came for me to leave the base. My car had already been packed. The military police truck, that was a 4-wheel drive, came to my dorm. They knocked on my door. We went down to the car, and they escorted me off the base, and shut the gate. And it wasn't because I'd been in shock. I hadn't really thought about next steps. That wasn't on my radar because I was so busy still dealing with what was going on that I hadn't thought about it. So I pulled up several hundred metres from the gates because I suddenly had become aware that I had nowhere to go. I lived on base. I'd just lost my home. So I effectively now was homeless. My worldly possessions were packed in the car around me, and I then sat in the car for a minute trying to think what I was going to do. There were reasons I couldn't go home at that time. I wasn't out to my family. I wasn't prepared to tell them that I'd been exited because I was a homosexual. Not that I believe they would have had a real issue with that anyway, but I just wasn't ready for that. As I said, I hadn't put that label on myself yet before the Air Force did. So I was sitting in my car, and I back then there was no mobile phones, no email. So if you wanted to speak to someone, you rang on the landline. That's how you spoke to people, it was on the landline. So I found a phone booth. Several blocks away from the base, there was a phone box, and I started calling the only person. I had a number from someone that I'd met in a bar. I didn't know anyone else outside the Air Force other than this one person who gave me his number once, and I couldn't say I really knowed him that well other than having hung out for drinks several times at a bar with him. And he was the only person I could call to try and find somewhere to stay that night. But unfortunately, he didn't pick up the phone for 2 days.
And you slept in your car for a couple of
I
days.
slept in my car for 2 days.
Now, can you tell us about the period of time that followed? You've been so-called honourably discharged.
Yeah.
How did you feel?
Sorry, Mr. Connor. Can I just say one thing about that period in that car, which I feel is very relevant, is that at that point in time, I'd gone from being a loyal, committed, enthusiastic member of the Air Force to jobless, unemployed, homeless, living in my car, surrounded by possessions in the space of less than 2 weeks. That was a lot for a 23-year-old to be dealing with at that point in time, that your whole career's gone up in smoke in 2 weeks and you're now living in your car on the side of a street. That's what they did to me.
Thank you, Mr. Liversidge.
And every time over those 2-day periods that someone didn't answer their phone, I felt lonelier, more isolated, and to be honest, suicidal. There's 2 ways it could have gone if no one had picked up that phone. And then one of them would have ended up with me not being here today.
Fortunately, your acquaintance picked up the phone.
Picked up the phone and gave me somewhere to live.
I believe you have some views about what should have happened to you, as it were. Accepting that you've been so-called honourably discharged.
Yeah.
What should have happened, do you think, after that?
Well, first of all, 12 months later, the policy changed from me being suddenly incompatible to now I was compatible. And, to be honest, if the Air Force had reached out to me and said, we understand, we would discharge you under this policy, we want you to know that policy has now changed, we would like to welcome you back, I would have been back there in a flash, without a doubt. Despite what they did to me, I would have went back because that was the career that I wanted.
And become a 20-year man.
And become the 20-year man that I was meant to be.